debates and decisions that are shaping our continent now in Europeans.
Bonsoir. Deux baguettes, s'il vous plaît.
The baguette. It may be a stereotype of the French, but it's also become a symbol of soaring prices, of the steep increase in the cost of living. And a growing number of French are finding it harder to make ends meet at the end of the month. Frédéric Daverne lives with his wife and small daughter in Belleville. It's a small town in the Beaujolais region. He works for the National Railway Company. She's a teacher. Their combined salaries give them a monthly budget of just under 3,000 euros. Too little, they say, to buy a house with starting prices at over 200,000 euros. They are middle class and they worry they will be worse off than their parents' generation.
Mostly, it's about housing. I tell myself, well, we earn enough, and we've chosen to rent rather than buy. We simply find that would be too expensive. When you look at the bottom line, yes, our parents in the past, also middle class, though somewhat at the more modest end of it, they got along better.
When you compare with the previous generation, specifically our parents, it's true that the biggest difference, perhaps, is property. We're not sure we'll be able to leave our children a nest egg in the form of property at the end of our lives.
It's estimated an average French middle-class family of four has a monthly budget of 3,200 euros. But over the last 2 years, soaring oil, food and property prices have dramatically shrunk their disposable income. And today, purchasing power has replaced unemployment as the #1 concern for the French. The head of the CSA Survey Institute identifies the main reasons why the middle class feel the pinch, both financially and psychologically.
Lower income earners can often get into socially subsidized housing with controlled rent. The middle class feels the full impact of rent increases, and there are a lot of people renting in France. That's the first reason. The second reason is that during his campaign to become president, Nicolas Sarkozy spread the message to the middle classes that they'd soon regain room to maneuver to set themselves apart. Now, since a characteristic of the middle classes is to see themselves as upwardly mobile, psychologically, they also feel harder hit.
Gilles Colombin is a psychologist. He lives in Lyon. He's been working longer hours to earn more money. It's one of President Sarkozy's political battle cries. But for him, it doesn't work.
For me, it's clear, and I see it with quite a few of our friends. Everyone is saying it. Salaries haven't budged, but prices have risen enormously. It's clear, therefore, that this is a real crisis.
Because Gilles has his own practice, he's a victim of the dramatic rise in rental and oil prices. He says some months he doesn't touch a salary. Gilles, his wife and 2 sons live in this house. It's part of a family heritage they were able to buy 20 years ago. For them, it's their saving grace. Their monthly budget is under 3,000 euros.
We were lucky that we bought this house 20 years ago, so we live well. That, for me, is just so important. If we had to pay for it now, or rent, that definitely would be impossible for us.
I've been set up in business as a psychologist and seeing patients for 5 years now. My lease has doubled in that time, and obviously the bills, as everyone knows. Then there's petrol. As part of my practice, I do group work with associations, in teams, in institutions around Lyon. I drive a diesel, and I'm spending more than a third more on that than a year or two ago.
J'ai pris plus d'un tiers de ce que je dépensais il y a un an ou deux, quoi.
And looking at the economic horizon, some economists warn a barrel of oil could reach $200 by 2010. And expensive fuel has had a boomerang effect on food products. But for this economist, the irony is that individual purchasing power has actually increased, but for electronic products and not for food.
What a lot of households are talking about these days is what they see as daily inflation. I go to buy a baguette and it's more expensive. I buy yogurt and it's risen by 46%. That's daily inflation. But in contrast, if I go to buy a flat screen, I do that once a year and I'll pay 40% less. But I don't take that into account when I look at inflation overall.
But you don't eat televisions every day. And filling up the food basket is getting more and more expensive, especially when, like Andrea Cotin, you have a husband and 4 children to feed.
Ça coûte bien moins cher qu'ailleurs, quand c'est du pur jus.
Andrea is German but has been living in Lyon for almost 15 years. She's currently unemployed but admits she's lucky her husband, who's French, has a good job as an engineer. This allows her to spend more time shopping, or rather investigating for the best prices. She also says she's noticed more French shopping in discount stores, something the Germans have already been doing for years.
I always paid quite close attention, but I'd say that recently I've taken to making lists for different stores.
Although economists predict some food prices will drop from their dramatic high, they warn the days of cheap food are over. With this in mind, Andrea has started a vegetable garden. It's her peaceful revolution against rising prices.
I've always liked gardening, but it was more for decoration. Now I tell myself, since I know how this is treated, how that grows, well, I think it's productive. It costs less.
But as the prices keep jumping higher, so does the frustration. The frustration of a class which is neither rich nor poor, but in the middle.
The middle class is disappearing. Now there'll be 2 classes, the rich and the poor. Even we're going down. We used to have a higher standard of living, when we could afford to buy more things, go out to restaurants more often. We can't allow ourselves that anymore because we're slipping into a lower class.
From the middle class point of view, there's obviously a feeling of injustice, of being forgotten. That is, every time measures are announced, it's either for those at the bottom of the income ladder or for those earning the top revenue. So, effectively, the middle class caught in between feels forgotten.
The government has promised that reforms will make France more competitive and increase its buying power. But for those in the middle, it's just more of the same old song.